Hello and welcome to the Cardiac Cats YouTube channel. Today we're going to be recapping the second day of the NFL Draft. Just want to give some thoughts on the two selections Jaguars made, some notes from their press conference after the second day of the draft, and maybe a little bit of a look into what we can expect on day 3. So, first things first. Much like the first round, very unpredictable. I don't think there was a person on the planet outside of the organization that knew what the pick was going to be. I mean, it really feels that way, right? So, you see a lot of the picks going off the board before. Things fell pretty well for the Jaguars. Had an opportunity to move up in the second, potentially go get a Brian Branch. Weren't able to do it. You wonder if they tried based off of their press conference, because Balky did say that there were deals they tried to make throughout the day that just didn't work out. That may have been one of them. Could have also seen it for Cam Smith. Went off the board a few picks before Jacksonville selected. And you get to 56. One of the biggest players on the board at that point, although you already hit tackle, right? But Torrance was still there at 56 on the board, which was crazy. And Jacksonville ultimately decided to pass on him. That was not the guy they were targeting. They traded back from 56 to 61 with the Bears, acquired another fourth. Good capital, right? But made a pick that a lot of people weren't expecting in Brenton Strange. Now, Strange isn't a guy I really watched a lot. Didn't really watch him much at all before this selection. I've got to see a little bit on him since. I've got to hear a good amount on him. And ultimately, while I would have done other things at this selection, I still think it's a fair pick for this offense and someone who will fit into the system. You know, I think he's a better run blocker than what you got out of Evan Ingram right now. So this is your second selection in the draft that's going to improve that room, because now, you know, aside from just getting a good run blocker in Anton Harrison, you also got that tight end, and you're going to help that backfield out. And I think that's really important. We talked about that earlier in the offseason. I really wanted this team to improve the run blocking. And I think that after what they did with this pick and the next one too, which we'll talk about, the Jaguars are a two-dimensional monster on offense. That is the bright side of this. And like I said, I would have done it differently. I would have picked up O'Cyrus Torrence at 56, and if I didn't do that, I would have rather preferred to trade up for probably Brian Branch. Probably would have been with the Jets. Could have been even earlier. I would have targeted a player like that. If it wasn't that, I would have targeted Cam Smith around this range. It's easy to say that in hindsight, perhaps, but that's what I would have planned at the time, too. I think those players were absolutely worth it. But at the same time, I think they got a decent selection. They got a player that a lot of people around the league apparently liked, and someone who's going to be a good culture fit and fit the offense. So that's the route they took. Wasn't what I expected at all, but, you know, Strange is a Jacksonville Jaguar, and the tight end room on this team looks pretty dang good. You feel pretty comfortable with it, and, you know, even before today, I think I said it to one of my friends while I was talking about it. You know, one of the weaknesses on offense was if Evan Ingram went down. There's not really a tight end that you trusted to be good in the receiving game. You know, Garrett Prince wasn't on the roster outside of just being a practice squad guy, and Luke Farrell is a better blocker. So getting a guy like Brenton Strange in the second round is a pretty solid pick for Jacksonville, and I think it does improve the team. Now we get into the third round. They made their first selection at their pick they had before the draft, because every other selection was traded at some point. They moved back for all of them. But the Jaguars had some different options on the board. Now, ultimately, man, I mean, you look at who went after, it's crazy, because I don't think any of the people who have gone since their pick were really players I was eyeing. So technically right now, and at least until the draft starts tomorrow, all the players that I would have liked are still on the board. But the Jaguars went a very different approach, and one that's been heavily scrutinized for, I think, somewhat fair reasons. They want to tank Bigsby at running back. And the scrutiny doesn't come against Tank Bigsby as a player, right? It comes against the fact that there's 4 running backs on the team before making this selection. And, those guys, just to state them, you got Travis Etienne, Dearness Johnson, Jermichael Hasty, and then Snoop Connor, who you haven't seen much out of, but he was just picked last year. And I think it's clear, the Jaguars don't see much in Snoop Connor. You see the contract with Dearness Johnson. I think it was a really good signing, but I'm not sure it's a long-term one. And with Jermichael Hasty, I think they just wanted to keep a backup in the room when they signed him. You can move on from him really at any point you want to. There's only, I believe, about $300,000 guaranteed to him as of now. If you wanted to cut him, that's all you would lose. So it's not a huge deal cap-wise. And ultimately for the Jaguars, they feel like they're getting the type of player that they were missing on this team. They really did not have a power back. And you're also getting a guy who has really great vision. He's not going to be a receiver. He's not going to do a ton in that regard. But he is going to help a lot on short yardage downs. And you're going to like the change of pace that you get from him. So as a prospect, he's a fun guy for the Jaguars to select. But the frustration also comes from who was not selected at this point. Look at PFF over here. Let's just look at some of the players still on the board at this point. Let's see. We've got DeJuan Jones for one. Now, I wouldn't take him, right? But it just kind of shows you how much talent is still out there. Dude's a day 3 pick. I mean, no one would have thought that would happen. Antonio Johnson is sitting on the board. He'd be a really nice guy to add against tight ends. You've got Adetomiwa Adebari, someone that people thought could sneak into the first. Perhaps the issue is that he's seen as a tweener. But I still think a very good prospect. And Clark Phillips. You could also throw in a lot of other corners on this list. A lot of depth there. But Clark Phillips, I thought he was going to be the pick in the third. Or at least the most likely. Because I think he fits what you want with character. I think he fits your need. I just think he's a great pick for the team. And that was not the route they went. But there were a lot of players that they chose to skip over for Tank Bigsby. And so, it tells you a lot about how they see him. Or perhaps it tells you a lot about how they see these other prospects. One or the other, or maybe a mix. But they did talk about in their press conference they wanted to trade up. They were late to the meeting, actually, with the media, because they were trying to trade up for these final picks in the third round. I think it's very, very likely that you see Jacksonville move up into these first few selections tomorrow and go pick up probably a defensive player. I would imagine it's not going to be offense for the 4th time in a row. And I could see one of these prospects going. So, we'll wait till tomorrow. We'll see what happens. But you look at the team, and I think you have to be extremely confident in the offense, although you obviously would wish they did something for the defense by this point. I mean, you didn't really imagine they would ignore it past the 3rd round, but they stayed true to their board. They picked the best players available in their own eyes, and this is where it's got them. Sometimes it falls like this. I mean, there's alternate scenarios where they aren't even taking an offensive player to this point. But the way it fell, that's what they're doing. You look at the positions on this team, though. I mean, we'll look at a depth chart. I don't know if it'll be updated, but you get an idea of, what we're looking at here. So you got Brenton Strange, right? I don't have Tank Bigsby on here. But I mean, you look at the offense, it's loaded. I think the only thing that you could say is missing is a backup receiver at this point. It's the only thing I would ask for. And I do think that's important to hit, and they will be able to hit that on day 3. But you look at quarterback, obviously Lawrence is great. Like, not a concern in Jacksonville, we all know that. But at running back, Travis Etienne backed up by Tank Bigsby. Guy who's going to be a great change of pace. Got Jermichael Hasty, who was a solid backup. Dearness Johnson, who's shown the capability to take over in games. Your backfield is disgusting in a good way. At receiver, you feel great about your starters. I mean, Christian Kirk played great last year for what you expected. Overperformed. Calvin Ridley you see as the number 1 guy, a 1,400-yard receiver. And Zay Jones, a very worthy starter on an NFL team. A good player. So you've got that. Your tight end room, you get a guy who can complement Evan Ingram really well, help out in the run game. That's what you get in Brenton Strange. Still got Luke Farrell and Garrett Prince behind that. A lot of young talent there behind Evan Ingram. And then when you go to your offensive line, I mean, with Anton Harrison on this team now, you've got 3 tackles that are very much capable of starting in the NFL. One of them's going to play guard when they're all active. So you've got that, and it's going to be that left guard spot, most likely. Assuming Brandon Scherf isn't down or something. But you've also got Luke Fortner and Brandon Scherf starting on your offensive line. Your running game is great now. You have all this depth in that room. You have players who upgrade the blocking. This is a 2-dimensional offense. Every pick they've made has helped the run game. So feel really good about the offense. At least feel that way, I hope. Because that's what's really been addressed today and yesterday. Now, on the defensive side of the ball, obviously nothing has happened. But as far as needs, we all see slot corner as a big need. The other thing I see as a big need is a backup at outside corner. And so I believe they need to target a player that is versatile at both outside and inside. However, the Jaguars did make it very clear that they feel comfortable with Trey Herndon starting on the team. And to me, I think we all agree you can upgrade. But if you have to start him, I mean, you can get by. I think it's a weakness still, but it's not one that's fatal on this team. They still won at the end of the year. They still went on a massive winning streak. And that was with Trey Herndon starting in the slot. Your issue comes from an outside injury, primarily, but you want to upgrade slot too. So getting a versatile corner is going to be really important. At safety, Andrew Wingard's a really good backup to both sides. I'm not that concerned there. Getting depth is great if you can get it. Linebacker you're not concerned about. It's really edge where you feel like you want to add. And that's more so if you have a really good value, because you look at free agency, you look at the money available, they have everything they need to be able to address that. So going into day 3 of the draft, they have 10 selections. They're showing that they are willing to trade up. There are, to me, 2 needs that I feel like should be addressed on this team. One that must be addressed on this team. The one that must, that's pretty obvious, is that inside or outside versatile corner on defense that starts in the nickel. That is the first one. The second one is getting a wide receiver that can back up and play all over. Ideally all over. At least outside, though, because Jamal Agnew can play in the slot if you absolutely need it. So 2 players I look at as the best options, that is, Clark Phillips. I think he's the corner you're looking for. I think it's ridiculous he's available here, but that's who I would trade up for. And then at wide receiver, see if he's too far down the board here, which I have a lot higher on my own. Xavier Hutchinson, because he can play inside, he can play outside. He offers what you're missing after losing Marvin Jones, and he's just a really good fit. into this offense, guys even from Jacksonville. So those are two players I want to watch, two players I really want to come to this team, and they have the selections to go do it. I mean, they can give up, if they need to, they can give up 2 fourth-rounders to go move up. Worst case scenario. I mean, you have so many picks at this point, you have to consolidate, and it's clear they want to consolidate. So I think you'll see them move up early into the 4th round. It's a good chance they're targeting a corner with that. And I also think they're going to hit that receiver position at some point in that range. You know, you look at really what they have left that they can hit on the offense. That's probably about it. You could talk about guard, perhaps. I don't think they're going to double dip at anything on offense. And on the defensive side of the ball, you know, you could talk about really anything along the defensive line, on the edge, and safety. So there's some positions they can hit, but there's a somewhat limited amount. And with this many selections, I think you're going to at least see one receiver come to the team. You're going to see a corner. So for us, it's just a waiting game at this point. We just got to get to tomorrow, see who they pick. You know, this is where we really reap the benefits of all these trade backs, all these decisions, and hopefully they use the picks well. So that's what we've got here, and that's what I do. I wish them luck, and I hope they pick really well. But I appreciate you guys watching. I'm not sure as of now whether I'll be out at the draft or not, but regardless, we'll have a video up tomorrow kind of reviewing things. If I'm home, might do a little bit of live streaming for the 4th round, just for the selections they make, because there's going to be a heck of a lot going on. But that's kind of my plan for this, and you know, once the draft's over, we'll kind of recap where things are. But I appreciate y'all watching. I hope you have a great rest of your day, and finally, go Jags.